Hi, I'm John Knowles, software trainer for Adobe, and today we'll be talking about Essential Graphics. Now, if you're not familiar with Essential Graphics, they replace the older legacy titles, and they're a very powerful tool for creating text and graphics inside Premiere Pro while being really easy to use. Let me show you. I have a Premiere Pro project open here with a series of interviews. I have two subjects, and I need to give them both lower thirds. Let me go ahead and just mute the audio here. So we have Journey here, who is a sprinter, and then we have her coach here, Keelan. So we're going to start with a lower third here for Journey. And before I do that, I need to set up the workspace so I can see the Essential Graphics panel. We can do that one of two ways. I can go up here to Window and just open up Essential Graphics. Or I could go to Workspaces and go to Captions and Graphics. That will also open up the Essential Graphics panel and reconfigure my interface a little bit. I'm just going to go ahead and open the Essential Graphics panel through the Window menu. And here it is over here on the right-hand side. It appears as a column like this, and it is in Browse mode. Now, what is Browse mode? This is a browser that shows you all of the templates that are available both on your system as well as through Adobe stock. So at the top here, it says My Templates. These are all the templates that I have installed on my system, whether I created them myself or they came installed with Premiere Pro. And we also have a shortcut to go directly to Adobe stock where you can find other templates, pay for them, and download them immediately. You can also click on this little free button right here and see what is available for free from Adobe. As long as you have an active subscription, you can just peruse the free section here and download what you want directly into your project. Okay, let's make our first lower third. How do we do that? We go over here to the toolbar and we select the type tool, the T. You can also use your keyboard shortcut to get there. Mine is mapped to Command T. And just click right there in the program monitor. That creates a blinking cursor right here where you can type in a name. There we are. And this lights up the edit side of the Essential Graphics panel. And this is where we're going to live the rest of this lesson here. We can see all of the options available to us just for this one line of text. I'm going to switch over to the regular selection tool. You notice that the box around the type now changes to a blue box with handles on the corner. So this is what I call transform mode. I can't edit the text, but I can move this element around on the screen, and by dragging those transform controls on the corners there, I can scale it, and it is proportional, so you don't have to worry about holding down the shift key or anything like that. You can also hover just outside of them and click and drag to rotate. Or just grab it in the middle and move it around. So that's transform mode. If you go back to the type tool and click inside of it, whenever you see red, you are in edit mode, and then you can then modify the text inside of it. So if we wanted to add her middle initial, for example, let's go ahead and take that back out. Go back into transform mode. Let's go through all the sections here of the Essential Graphics panel. At the top, we have our layer. This is her name. It is listed right there, and the T tells me that that is a text layer. Below that are options to add groups as well as additional layers. You can add additional text layers, shapes like a rectangle, an ellipse, or a polygon. This option here from File, you can actually add a graphic like a logo or a bug from your hard drive or directly from your project if you already have it imported. Below that are some pinning options. I'll explain that in a little bit. This alignment sets the alignment of the element on the screen in relationship to the overall frame. So this is centered horizontally. You can also center it vertically. That's right there in the middle, or flush it to the bottom, top, left, or right of the screen. And I'm just going to reposition it by dragging it like so. I also have some position options here. That's the crosshairs, so my X and Y values to move it around. And this is the anchor point. Notice if I scrub the anchor point, the text moves, and the anchor point, which is the crosshair here in the middle, does not move. Typically, you want the anchor point to be at 0, 0, unless you specifically want to move it someplace else. For example, in the center of that text block, and then all of my transformations are going to happen around the anchor point. So if I scale it, which is this next one down here, it's going to scale around the anchor point like so. Set that back. Now, again, with anything that is blue text in Premiere Pro, that means one of two things. You can simply type in a value. I'll go to 80% scale. Or you can simply hover inside of it and scrub to get the value that you want. This chain link here tells me that the horizontal and vertical scale are linked together. If I unlink them, then I can stretch or squeeze at will. I'm just going to reset that. Keep those locked together for now. This is rotation. And this one is for opacity. Below that, we have styles. I'll explain that again in a minute. And then we have options here for the actual font. This is Minion Pro. I'm not super happy with that. I'm going to choose a different font. I can just type it in, or I can scroll down depending how I want to search for that font. If I know what it is, I'm just going to start typing it in, and I get a series of options here. I'm going to go with Myriad Pro, and I'll do light. Okay, that looks pretty good. And then this is the weight options down here. Once I've selected the font, if I can just select the different weights down here below, so I can take a look at condensed, semi-bold, condensed, regular, etc. I'm going to stick with light for now. Now, next to that is the type size slider. I can make the type larger or smaller here. This works the same as the scale here above. What I like to do is set the point size down here and leave the scale at 100. That way, if I'm doing some animations down the road, I like to use the scale for the animations where I have a very obvious system of 0 to 100% for the scale, and then the type size is going to remain at whatever the type size is at 100%. So I'll set that to 72. That looks pretty good. Now we have options here for type alignment. This is left aligned. I can also center it or align it to the right. Notice that that shifts the location of the anchor point here. I'll leave that aligned left. Now these options here for vertical alignment only matter when you're dealing with text that's already in a text box. And by that, I mean you can actually draw a text box by holding down with the type tool like so, and you would put your text inside of that. And that you can change the vertical alignment on like so. That's for larger chunks of text, like a paragraph that you want to put on screen, and you can choose to align it like so. I'm just going to take that layer out. I'm just going to click on it and hit delete and remove that. Go back to my name here in the lower third. Now we have options here for tracking. That's the distance between letters. All right, I'm going to leave that at 10. And we also have kerning. You have to use the type tool and put the cursor between two letters to enable kerning, which is only the space between those two letters. Like so. Tuck it nice and tight in with the W. And next to that, we have leading. So if I put her title here below and adjust the leading, that's the space between the two lines. I'm actually going to put her title in a separate line so we don't need it like that. Yeah, set that back to 0. This is baseline shift for moving individual letters up and down at will. This is a way to set the distance for a tab if you want to click the tab key and move your text and have it all aligned that way. Now below this are options for faux bold and faux italic, and that will simply add weight or add a slant. Now, quick typography tip. If the font you chose has those weights available, please use those instead. They'll look much better. This font does have a bold, so I don't need to use the faux bold button. But it does not appear to have an italic weight. So if I really did need italic, that's a case where I could choose that. But always look for a bold or an italic first before you choose these faux options. Set that back to light. We have options here for all caps, small caps. Then we have options here for superscript and subscript. That's for special scenarios where maybe you want to have a number float at the top like this or below, for example. Just going to remove that. And then next to that is underlining. All right, very straightforward. Now these options here are for changing the orientation of your text in foreign languages. Sometimes you go from right to left instead of from left to right. And this is for sumi, which if you know what that means, is certain kanji characters, you can adjust the sumi. And below this is appearance. We have a fill color, which we can change. All right, you bring that up. You get the color wheel, or you can use the eyedropper to pick a color already in the shot, for example. I'm just going to leave that, set that back to white. That's popping very nicely here against this dark background. You could add a stroke to the text if you want and control the size of the stroke like so and where it appears. So outer, inner, or from the center, out. All right. I'm going to turn that off for now. Now the background option will create a box around the text. At its default, the box is tightly wrapped right around the letters, and you can change that by moving this second slider here, which will expand the box. And you can directly control the opacity of that box and whether it has rounded corners or not. Now, there's a different way to do background text boxes that also configure themselves to the text that's inside of them. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Turn that off for now, and then we can always add a drop shadow and control that. The mask with text option gives you the ability to add other shapes to the layer stack and then use the text to knock out that layer so that your video shows through where the text is, sort of like a track mat. Okay, let's continue with our lower third. We have our subject's name here. We need to give them a title. So I'm going to grab the text tool and make a title below on a second line. She is a sprinter. There we go. We're going to change the type weight for that. I'm going to set that to bold. I'm going to make it all caps, and I'm going to make it just over half the size of her name. Now notice that once I added that second line of text, it appears up here in the layer stack. So now I have 2 lines of text here in my essential graphic, which appears as one element down here on the timeline. Let me enlarge that for us here. We can see it says sprinter. Okay, that's because her title is the topmost layer in the stack. Your essential graphic will always be named after the part of the graphic that is the highest in the layer stack. So if you want to rename it, let's just move that below, and I'll pull sprinter below her name. And now back down here on the timeline, we can see that Journey Woo is the name of the graphic. Now, every time you add a layer, it's still going to be 1 track deep on Premiere Pro. You don't have to worry about multiple layers stacking up on top of each other. Everything is contained in this one graphic. Now let's add another element to our lower third. We need a box behind her title. How do we do that? Well, you just click on this new item button here at the bottom of the Essential Graphics layer stack and select rectangle. That puts a gray box in the middle of the screen. That's the default. And I'm just going to use the regular selection tool to pull that over here. And I can grab those little blue dots on the corners, and I can use that to stretch it into place and give it a size that I like so. And these little white wheels, by the way, are for rounding the corners. If you want more of a lozenge shape instead of a rectangle, you can use those. Otherwise, just use the blue dots to scale this and stretch it at will. And now, of course, again, I need to move that below. Every new item is going to automatically float to the top of the layer stack, so I need to pull that down. And I'm going to rename it. Just click on it. Call that one title box, like so. And I'm going to give it a better color than this gray. I think I'm going to go for something a little more orange. That'll pop nicely, like so. A little bit darker. There we go. That looks pretty good. And you know what? I'm going to take that point size down just a little bit. I feel like it's competing with my name text. So I'm just going to slide that down like so. There we go. That looks really nice. Okay. So we've got our box here to kind of give it some pop off the background. Now, if I want to make sure that the text inside the box is aligned with the box, I can select both by holding down the Shift key. And then you see here on the align section here, I have align to selection is selected, and I can center them both vertically like so. I could also flush them both left or right, or center them horizontally like so. I'm just going to do that and then just pull the text out like this. I can also align the text against the text above by doing the same thing. There we go. So now both pieces of text are aligned with each other on the left edge, and I'll just move the box over just so it hangs over just slightly. There we go, like so. Now, there are a couple of options for linking or grouping items together inside the Essential Graphics panel so that they move together. So for example, I could take the word sprinter here, her title, and put it inside a group and rename the group. I'm going to call this one job title. And I'll also move the title box into that group. Whoops, like so. There we go, below. And now all I need to do is grab the group itself and drag it, or use these transform controls here to move it around or scale it. And those two items will scale or move together. Now notice that the size of that group is actually linked to the size of your frame. So this group, the boundaries of it are the 1920 by 1080 dimensions of the overall frame. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you group things together like this. Now let me show you one more way to link two items together here in Essential Graphics. So if I take the box here, and I'm going to resize it so that it more or less wraps perfectly around the text, equal distant on all sides here, and I'll just make sure that those are both perfectly centered. What happens if I change her title? I'll go back to my text tool here, and I will type in javelin throw instead of sprinter. And obviously the text is going to now go outside of the box, and I have to resize the box to fit, which can get annoying if you have to do multiple lower thirds in the same project. There's actually a shortcut for making sure that that box automatically resizes with the text that's above it. This is called pinning. I'm going to take that box now, select it up here in the layer stack, and below that, under responsive design, you see pin to. By default, it's set to video frame, but I can select another layer inside the Essential Graphics stack. I'm going to select javelin throw, which is her job title here. And next to that, we have options here of which edge to pin it to. We can do top edge, bottom edge, left, right, just by selecting it like this. There's also a shortcut for selecting all four edges simultaneously, which is just click on that square in the middle. Okay, so now I'm going to go back and change her job title back to sprinter. And see what happened with the box there? Because it is pinned to the length of that text, it's going to automatically resize. So no matter what I put here in this text box, it's going to get larger. Now, if you want to make the box a little bit wider, that's totally fine too. I'll go back here to the box and I will just pull out the length like so, just to give it a little more distance there. I can go back here and still put in other text, and the box size will just keep adding or subtracting, but still will honor the amount of extra space that I gave it there on the right hand side. All right, my lower third's looking really good. What I want to do is make sure that it is inside my action and title safe margins. I can pull that up here with the wrench menu and go to safe margins and display them on screen like so. Or I can add a button to this button bar below the program monitor here. I have it right there. Safe margins. One click on or off. You can add additional buttons to your monitors, both the source and program monitor, by the way, with this button editor. Click on the little plus sign and just drag any of these buttons that you want to see down here down into the button bar, or drag the ones out that you no longer want to see. So now I have safe margins here. I'll just turn them on briefly. That looks pretty good. I can quickly move those together, both her name, her title, and the box. With no layers selected, I am moving the entire Essential graphic, not just the individual lines. I'm moving them together, and I'll just put that right at the edge of title safe there, and maybe down just slightly. Again, I'm moving both of those simultaneously with none of the layers up here selected. All right, and I'll just turn the safe margins back off. So there we go. That's our lower third. Now, if I were to use that for another person in this interview, so that's Journey, she's an athlete, and then we have Keelan here, who is a coach. How do I quickly add the lower third or duplicate the lower third for the other person? I'm going to hold down the Option on a Mac or Alt key on PC and just drag. And put that over there. And now for Keelan, I'm going to change the names, just use the Type tool. This is Keelan Matthews, and he is not a sprinter. He is a track coach. All right, notice the box resized as it should, and I think I'm actually out of title safe now, so I want to go back. Yeah, I need to move the whole thing. Just deselect that, move that back into title save. There we go. And for his, I might want to move the box over. There we go. Clean that up a little bit. But you see how when I change this lower third based on the original, it is not affecting the original lower third. Those are two separate items. They have no relationship to each other, and you can change the text at will. But because they have no direct relationship, if you start changing something like the text or text size in one lower third, it won't automatically translate to another lower third. You'd have to go back and redo them all. It's very common at the end or near the end of a project for someone to give a note, let's change the font, let's change a color, let's change the size. And you've already done several lower thirds, maybe a couple of dozen inside of a larger documentary project or interview project. And you have to go back and then change them all by hand. Well, let me show you some ways where you can get around having to do that. I'm going to go back over here to the original lower third here with Journey, and I'm going to assign some text styles to the text. So here under the styles section, it says none. I'm going to actually create a style, and I'm going to call this name 1 and hit OK. And now this collection of parameters here, the type, size, weight, the actual font, all of that is included in this style. And I'll do the same thing for the job title here. Again, create style. I'm going to call this title 1. All right. Now notice this is creating objects inside our project. When you create a style, it actually adds that style as an element inside your Premiere Pro project, and you can actually take those, drag and drop them onto new text, and it will automatically apply that style to the text. So now that we've set those up, if I go back in here and I change something, so I'm going to change the fill of her job title to black inside that orange bar. So if I click on the job title here, you'll see that the style for the title has been modified. That's what that's telling me right there. If I want to quickly reset that to the save style, I'm going to use the down arrow, which is called sync from style, and it resets it back to the way I set that up. But let's say I do want to make that typography change, and I do want to push that to all of the other lower thirds inside my project. Well, here's how that works. I'm going to go back here to Keelan's lower third and make sure that he has the style set up for his text like so. There we go. I'll click on his job title and set that to the title style. I'll go back to Journey and I will select her job title and again change the color to black, hit OK, and it tells me that the style has been modified. Instead of syncing, which is going to reset it to white, I'm going to push to track or style. And now that black text is the new color of that style in the entire project. If I go back to Keelan, his job title is now black. That's the power of styles. When you make a change to the style and push that change, all the other essential graphics, lower thirds, and text blocks that are using that style will automatically get updated to the changes that you made without having to go in and individually change them all. It's a very, very powerful system. Now, since I've recorded this tutorial, there has been an update to the Essential Graphics panel in Premiere Pro, starting with version 24.3. In this version, they've changed how we deal with styles in the Essential Graphics panel. So I'm going to click on my lower third we previously made here, and we can see now that style is now called linked style here, and there is a style browser right here below, and we no longer have the push-pull option. So let me show you what these changes are. So when you change something on the lower third, like so I've just changed the color, you'll see that the style says it has been edited. And instead of the push-pull options, we have the option to redefine style. That's what this button is. That's very similar to the push. So that's changing the overall style. In this case, the Title 1 style. We'll change that style to have white text instead of black. Now, if you want to reset it, in other words, go back and do the pull, you have to flip it to none and then go back and reset the title like so, and it will change it back to the original style. There's some additional options here. There's a small drop down that shows you how many places this style has been used. So if you were to update it, you will actually see which sequences that would be affecting, where this lower third style is being used in this case. Now, if I want to make a new style based on what I've done here with this text, that option is now this plus sign here next to the words length style. And by clicking that, you can create a style. And I'm going to call this large call out, for example. Now, I have two options as to where this style is going to be saved. If I save to project, that style will be embedded in this Premiere Pro project. The next time I open it, it will be there. And if I send this project to someone, it will also be there. Now, if I like this style enough to maybe use it in a future project, I can save to local styles. In a sense, that's like saving it to the Essential Graphics browser, and you can use it again like a template. So when you save to local styles, it will put it on your computer, and you can reuse it again on further projects. In this case, I'm going to turn that off now and just save it inside the project and hit OK. By the way, back under that plus sign, you may have noticed you have the option to import styles, and then you can go to a style that's been saved to the computer or perhaps sent to you from another editor and import it into the browser. So there's the new style there. There's a little representation of it, and it's titled Large Callout. Now, next to that button there that shows me it is only being used right now in this one sequence, there is a brand new option called the Style Browser. It's this kind of quad button right here. And if I click on that, I will get a list of all the styles. Now, this is both local styles and project styles together in one big list. So you will see some repetition there. If you have saved it in both places, both local and project, you may see it listed twice. You can modify what you see here by just clicking these options here. So just show me local. So these 4 styles have been saved locally to my computer, or I can just look at styles that are in the open projects. In this case, this lower third project, here are all the styles that are part of that. And I can further drill down from there. If I have multiple projects open, I can see it that way. This is a list view. You can also look at them in icon view, and you will get a visual representation of what the styles look like very quickly. So if you want to change the style, you have the text highlighted, just click on it, and it will set the style accordingly. So that is the new style browser. It's a very powerful part of the Essential Graphics panel now. Just set up your styles in advance, save them locally, and anytime you open your project, just jump right to the style browser and select your text and add a new style, like so. Now, there's one other element we can add to this Essential Graphic to give it some pop, and that's animation. All right, I've zoomed in here on the lower third, and I'm going to move 12 frames in and set a keyframe there for the transformation of the name. Now, it's not obvious here, but these symbols under Align and Transform controls are actually buttons, and that button is going to arm them for animation and set a keyframe. So if I click on the crosshairs for position, I have just toggled a keyframe. I'm going to move the playhead back to the beginning of the Essential Graphic, and I'm going to just quickly pull it off screen. Notice I have that blue line. That's telling me that I now have animation there. That is the animation path, and by moving it, I automatically set that second keyframe. I'm just going to hit play, and there it is. I have a 12-frame move for that text. And also, I want to do something to the title as well and line those two up. Now, one caveat with Essential Graphics, you can do animation in the Essential Graphics panel like I just showed you, but one of the difficulties is lining up multiple animations with each other. We can't actually see the keyframes on a timeline in order to align them and manipulate them separately. So for that, we're actually going to use the Effects Controls panel. I'm going to go up here to Effects Controls, and you can see that when you have the Essential Graphics selected, all of the layers are represented here with their own sets of controls. So there's the name, and we have options here just the same as we had in Essential Graphics for things like the fill color, the font. Most of it is replicated one-to-one here in Effects Controls. And here is the job title, and now I can actually transform the entire group. All right, so if I want to have those fly in separately, I can do that. And so I'll move my play here, align it with the second keyframe of the name, which is above it. And I'm going to add position keyframes for the job title here. That's keyframe 1. And I'm just going to very quickly, again, move 12 frames down. Go back and add keyframe number 2. That's the final position. And go to keyframe 1 and move it off screen like so. So now I have this animation. Now, if I wanted to animate the entire lower third together as one graphic, I can go here under Vector Motion, which is the topmost tab here under the graphic and the effects controls. And if I were to move these position parameters around or scale, it would affect the entire graphic as one. So you can set keyframes for those if you want to. I'll just reset all of that. Unfortunately, opacity is not in that section. Opacity is below, so you have to scroll down a bit down here to the video section. And under those motion controls, we have opacity. I'm just going to set some quick opacity keyframes here at the end. I'm going to go 12 frames in from the end, and I'll set an opacity keyframe like so. There we go. And I'll move the playhead to the end of the essential graphic, and then I'll just set that value to 0. There we go. Now I have a fade out at the end. One quick troubleshooting tip here in effects controls, because there are so many ways to change the position of the overall essential graphic, you need to be careful about which one you choose. Vector Motion, as I mentioned here at the top, will change the position of the entire essential graphic on the frame, inside of the frame, or outside the frame, like so. You can also adjust the positioning of individual layers below using those controls. But down here at the bottom under the video tab, those are a third set of position controls. And if you play around with those, you might run into a circumstance like this, where if you move the overall frame around and then use Vector Motion to move the lower third, you'll actually have it disappear outside of the frame because I've moved it around so much. That's because Vector Motion has its own frame and Motion tab has its own frame, and they are independent of each other, which you could use for special effects if you want to have things appear from the center of the screen as if they're growing. Instead of coming from the sides of the frame, you can have them grow out of the center using the controls I just showed you. So there's different ways to use them creatively, but to avoid any unwanted cropping, you just want to keep the video position here, the video motion position here at the bottom, locked to the center unless you know you want to do some type of special effect. The only one we're going to keyframe down there is opacity for now. All right, the animation looks good. Now that animation is now part of that essential graphic. So if I were to Option or Alt drag it to another person on the timeline and change the text, the animation would also be there. Now there are circumstances where you might need to change the overall length of this lower third depending on the edit. Sometimes our lower thirds have to get on and off screen much quicker than the way we design them. This is a very generous lower third. This is about 5 seconds long. What happens if the lower third has to get shorter? I have another timeline here. This is not the assembly, this is the edit, and some of these edits go by very quickly. This initial shot of our athlete goes by pretty fast. If I were to copy and paste my lower third here from that timeline to this timeline, whoops, there we go, onto track 2, notice that it hangs off the edge because the lower third is now too long for the amount of time that the athlete is on screen, and it overlaps with Keelan. So I'm going to shorten the end of the lower third. But what happens? Well, I lost the transition there. I lost that nice fade out at the end of the lower third, which I want to keep. Or I could accidentally affect the beginning of my lower third by moving the endpoint in and then moving it into position. And then notice I've cut off the keyframes there at the head of this lower third. So how do we avoid doing that? There's a way to set up protected zones that will protect those keyframes from being altered when you change the length of the lower third. So it's called responsive design. I'll show you how to set that up. All right, I'm going to click on the lower third here. And notice if I have no layers selected, no individual layers selected, I have the options here for responsive design time, intro duration, outro duration. Now I'm going to set these to be just past the keyframes that I set to give myself some wiggle room. We had about 24 frames of animation at the beginning. I'm going to set that to 26. And we had 12 frames of animation at the end. I'm going to set that to 14 just to be safe here. Make sure that those safe zones perfectly encapsulate those keyframes. Actually set that to 16. There we go. There are those protected zones I talked about. You see the gray bands here. They're also reflected down here in the timeline. You can see white bands or lighter colored bands in that pink essential graphic on either end at the beginning and the ending. Watch what happens now. If I make that lower graphic shorter by pulling in the end, the animation is still intact. It fades out before it cuts to Keelan. If I were to go the other direction, I can make it longer, but then pull in the beginning of it like so and put that into position. I still have my opening keyframes as well as the closing keyframes. If I keep making it shorter, the keyframes are intact. So do yourself a favor, spend a little time when you're designing this lower third. If you want to use it as a template and you have animation keyframes like this, set up responsive design, intro and outro durations so that those keyframes will always be protected. It'll just grow or shrink the length of the lower third from the center out. Now, I'm going to click on the graphic and go under Graphics and Titles and export as Motion Graphics Template. This is what we also call a MOGRT. Here, I have the option to name it, and I'm going to call this lower third L3D track and field. Great. Now, here below, I'm going to skip down here to compatibility. If you're going to be giving these templates to someone else, you may want to give yourself a quick warning. Is this using a font that is available through Adobe Type? And is it using any effects that are third party? So I like to have that warning turned on just in case, to remind myself to either give those fonts to the other editor or to give those effects to the other editor if they're needed. And I can assign keywords down here if I want, just to make this easier to find later on. Track, field, lower third, etc. Those will all be added as keywords. There we go. And if I want to take one of them out, I can just click on it like that, take it away. Include video preview. This is a newer feature, a newer option, and if there's animation, you can actually see that right there in the browser. It's a very nice new feature. And really the most important section here is, where is this going? What's the destination? Now, local templates folder will put this on your system. If you want to save it to the local drive, that's going to put this MOGRT file, a .mogrt, somewhere on your system, and then you can then send that to other editors on your team, email it, put it in the cloud, however you want to distribute it. There's another option here as well for libraries, which are linked to your Adobe Cloud account, and you can share those libraries with any other Adobe user, and you would just select a library down here or create a new library and put it in that library folder. I'm just going to keep it in my local templates folder. I'll hit OK. And there we go. Where did that go? Well, if I go back to the Browse tab now, there it is. It's right there at the top. And if I chose those keywords that I was talking about, so let's just track. There it is. I typed one of the keywords that were included and it found it right away. And again, that's only on my system. If I wanted to give that to another editor, I would just save it to the local drive as a MOGRT file or to a library and send them those links. Now, there's one last thing I want to show you here with the Essential Graphics panel, and that's how to style subtitles and captions. I'm going to add the text panel here to my interface, and I've already transcribed this series of interviews here in the timeline, and I want to make a captions track, which is this button right here in the transcript panel, CC Create Captions, like so. And I'm going to create subtitles. If you're creating regular captions, a 608 or 708, for example, obviously the appearance of those captions is going to be dictated by the player, whether that's a TV broadcast channel, YouTube, or some other streaming platform. They're going to dictate how those captions will look. But subtitles, we have control over. And I'm just going to choose subtitle default, and you can drill down here and change all of these parameters like so. And if you have styles set up, you can actually choose the style like so, and it will automatically match that style. I don't want the title style. I can try with the name style, and it will match the style we did for the name, or I'll just leave that at none for now, and I'm going to create captions, and they appear here, and they also appear right there automatically in the program window, and that's the caption track right here, and these are my subtitles. And you see how it tracks it over here in the captions window, as well as on screen. Now I'm going to select this one right here under Coach Keelan, and I'm going to stylize this text. Now I can style these subtitles the same way I would style my lower third. If I select this caption here, I go to Essential Graphics panel. Notice that the layer stack looks a little bit different. I see it says subtitle up here, and I actually see a preview of the text. And below that, I have options for changing things like the font, again, the size, the stroke. Same thing I had with the lower third, but just with a few limitations. I can now change this to, let's say, Helvetica. There we are. I'll do a regular. And I'm going to add a, let's see, there's already a drop shadow there that looks really nice. And I'm going to create a new style for that and call this one subtitles. And that has now changed the styling on all of the other subtitles in the sequence here. I can also just make one individually different. So this one, I can change the fill color on. So I'll just go kind of a yellow here. And that only affects this individual subtitle. The other ones stay the same. I'll even change the point size just slightly here. And I can even change where it is on screen like so. Again, not affecting the other captions, just this one individual one. Now, if I want this style to be the global style now for all of the subtitles in this sequence here, I do the same thing I did with the lower third. Under styles, I will push to track or style. All captions on track is what I'm pushing it to. And now all of these subtitles will match the new styling, which is the new size and the new text color. Now, as I mentioned before in the addendum for the lower third text, we have a new system for updating styles, starting with version 24.3 of Premiere. And you see it here, I have the subtitle selected, and in the newer version, we have that redefine style button. So if I were to change the subtitle text, for example, I'll make it yellow. And if I click on that button, I have the option to redefine all captions on the track or the style in the project. So if I redefine all the captions on the track, they will all be yellow, but that original subtitle style, you see it says edited. If I was to revert that, set that to none, and then I will change that back to subtitles version 1. You see the style itself still has the white coloring. So if I were to update the entire style, let me make it a brighter yellow, and now I'm going to redefine the style, but I will change the style in the project. That new subtitle style not only will apply to the whole track, but the next time I apply it to another subtitle, it will be yellow, and I can see that now in the style browser that the subtitle style has been updated. So you can see the power of styles. Once you have it set up, you can change one and then push those changes to all the other subtitles, or the same thing we did with the lower thirds before. It just makes all of this so much easier and allows you to very quickly stylize an entire program's worth of text in a couple of clicks. Now, there's one more option I want to show you here, and that is how to make what's called a source graphic. I'm going to click again on that lower third, and I'll go back to graphics and titles, and I'm going to select upgrade to source graphic. Now, the intro and outro durations will not transfer. It's one of the downsides of using source graphics this way, but I do want to continue. So unfortunately, we'll lose our protected zones. But what this did was it placed it as a graphic in the project bins here. And I'll rename that to her name. There we go. This graphic now exists inside the project. I can simply drag it to another section of the program like so without having to option click drag it over. All right. Keep in mind, again, those responsive design areas are no longer there, so you have to be careful when you change the length of this. You'll have to actually redo the keyframes. Now, what makes a source graphic different than other Mogurt types is that once you change one instance of the source graphic, you change them all automatically. So if I go in here and add a, let's say, a middle initial to Journey's name, like so, and go back to the first instance of that source graphic, you can see that the middle initial has been added there as well. So it's a flexible system and you can use it however you'd like. If you prefer having a graphic inside the project bins and then every instance of the graphic, once you change one, changes them all, in one shot, you would use a source graphic, or you can just use a regular Mogurt, like so, that has responsive design and styles built into it, and just drag in new instances as you need them from your Essential Graphics browser. Now, we've barely scratched the surface of what Essential Graphics can do, but hopefully from this brief introduction, you can see the power and the flexibility of these tools and the ability to create animated text right inside Premiere Pro. Well, that's it for now. I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.